Hi, everyone. Welcome to Getting Personal with Compt. I'm your host, Lauren Schneider. I'm the head of communications here. And this is a show that is all about speaking to workplace experts to uncover the ways in which we can make the workplace a more human experience, not just a better employee experience. Too often, I think we forget that we are people first, even though we like to call ourselves people first companies. And with me today, I have Renee Viens, executive assistant, coach, and mentor. And honestly, Renee, I don't think that encapsulates everything that you do. So I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
My name's Renee Viens, and I've been an executive assistant for almost 20 years now. I've worked in many different sectors and technologies, um, power, insurance, SaaS-based, cloud-based. Now I'm working actually in biotech too, and now I'm working with venture capital. So I've seen a lot of industries, I've seen a lot of personalities, I've seen a lot of businesses, and um, it's a role where you really get a chance to do a lot of project-based work, and that can run the gamut from, like, really high corporate projects to, like, very personal projects, and I'd like to share a little bit about those things today with you and how I navigate those activities throughout my daily work and life and share some of those details with you.
Fantastic. Let's dive in then. So, in your role, how do you strategically manage, which I think is a fancy way to say juggle, and prioritize this myriad of tasks and decisions that you're faced with daily because you want to effectively support not just your executive, but the broader goals of the organization and all of the people within it.
So, one thing I will tell you, I think it starts at the interview process, first of all, in making sure that you've got the right fit with your employer. And I think, you know, when you especially start in an executive assistant role, you want to make sure that you've asked all the questions of your executive and that you guys are going to have a good partnership because that's the basis for all these activities anyway. Um, but I think it's so important to know yourself and to know how your manager is effective and kind of getting that thing. And that really starts with initial conversations and then how you build trust over a relationship. Um, and I think the biggest thing is having touch points. You have to have like not only weekly but like daily touch points with your executive and understanding them as a person, how they think and how they operate. And I would say those are some of the key pieces to really having a successful career in managing your activities. Um, I have taken in the past some of the Gallup strengths polls, and I know myself really well. And
Mm.
the top five categories for myself are context, discipline, relator, empathy, and harmony. So for me, in order to navigate my daily activities, I want to think about my executive. I want to think about what's possibly going on at home with them, what things are happening in the business with them, what are their strategic goals for this week, this month, this quarter, and the coming year. So you try to use all of those pieces, it's like puzzle pieces, to like make a strategy for them, knowing what prep times they need or um, what are their like the best times for them to like do their best work. And in order to organize all that, you kinda take that and I call myself a Jenga master. You, like, take all those pieces and then you Jenga them together to, like, make this puzzle that is the calendar. So, I feel like keeping in touch with your executive and, like, working hand in glove is so important because you need to really use that empathy, and I'm very high context. So, knowing contextual background and operating within that backdrop is super helpful to making them successful because unless you can kind of crawl into their brain and know how they think and what their MO is, you're not going to really work hand in hand together. So for me, there's a lot of these little puzzle pieces that go together for you to be like, okay, I get this person. I understand where they're coming from. I know what they're going to think next or how they're going to think. And that takes time. But if you have the building blocks from the starting gate, you can get along with them and kind of get to those places where they want you to be their co-pilot.
I love how you position this as like, well, it's just something that I do. It just makes it you're I think what happens is when you're really good at something, or maybe you're natural at it, it becomes so easy to you. But I don't want to downplay the fact that this is like a very highly sought after and important skill to have where you're not just um assessing the needs of the organization, but anticipating the needs of both that and the executive that you are working with and for. So, I want to distill down to maybe a challenging situation that you have faced to try to offer some just like a tangible example to the people who are watching. Um, and maybe you can describe like what did you have to do in that moment in order to achieve success?
Well, I can think of a couple examples, one more professional that was corporate and one that was kind of a project based. And I'll share with the first one with the corporate thing that happened. Um, we had to go through a corporate reorg and a downsizing situation, and you try to really like this is a really empathetic situation because there's people involved and it's emotions and it's jobs and you know you want to approach this with so much care. And so when this type of thing happens, the management team sorts out how they're going to handle it and what they're going to do, but you really want to think, okay, in my approach, how do I be thoughtful? And then, maybe the executive comes to you and they're saying, okay, if somebody messaged you with this, how would you react? And
Mm,
so you kind of take that, internalize it, and say, okay, because you want to think about maybe a different way that the executive is intending it, or somebody's intending to convey a message, and who's going to be on the receiving end, and how might they perceive that. So it's a lot of it's just my feeling. It's like my empathy and my radar and everything has to turn on. And I thought about like, okay, um, being sensitive and careful and helping the people saying, okay, let's look at this together, and not just from a management team perspective, but from other people that are being affected in a situation like this, and just trying to be very empathetic and step into that person's shoes. I mean, I think a lot of this comes from in your brain stepping into, I'm the leader. These are the shoes I'm going to stand in for a few minutes and think about like, this is how I need to um, share a situation and communicate in a way that makes sense for the organization. But then you also change shoes to stand in the other person's shoes who are, being affected. So trying to like help somebody craft a message or shape a message, and looking at it together saying, okay, let's team up and let's think about when we say this, what's the recipient going to think.
that's fascinating. It's like a strategic chameleon or something. I'm trying to liken what you do to what maybe someone else does in an organization because a lot of times to be successful and see across departments, you do have to have empathy for their situation and understand like maybe you don't know exactly how to do their job, but you know that there are things always happening in the background to get to the deliverable or what you can see. And I just think that's so fascinating. What you do is really like the glue of an organization.
Yeah, I think in the way that an executive assistant has so many touch points across the organization. I mean, we're interacting with HR departments and marketing departments and either product or design departments and, customer service departments. And I've been in organizations where you're really touching so many points, and you kind of you're that conduit, right? And I've
Mhm.
always likened it to like being the air traffic controller, right? You're you're standing there, you've got all the planes, and you're like trying to help all the planes guide and land and be in the right place so that nobody's bumping into each other and that they're all flying in tandem and that, things are flowing. And
Mhm.
so being the conduit, you're like, okay, I guess I have a lot of airline scenarios I think about. It's like being somebody's co-pilot to help them fly their own plane, but like keep an eye out on the horizon for all the other planes so that everybody's working together.
Sure.
And so there's times when you've come back from a meeting or a call or, you know, you bumped into somebody at the coffee machine and they were like, "Hey, this is going on. We're having this event," or, "Did you know that so and so was going to be in town for this other thing?" And then you're like, ding, 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 ding. And for me, I'm a high networker. So
Mm.
I'm always grabbing all these little pieces and going, okay, if so and so is going to be here and this other person, I know they wanted to meet with this person, or it's an opportune time for them to discuss something, I would bring that to my executive and be like, hey, did you know? Da da da. And then they were like, oh, that's really great. I never thought about that. And it's a way of like, you see across all these data points and you're able to
Mhm.
grab the ones that make sense to pull them together, and you can create opportunities and you can create kind of serendipitous I don't know, I guess serendipitous opportunities for helping people get together or discuss projects or things like that.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And
So
with that, I mean, this is kind of assumed, but I want to state that you have to be an excellent communicator, and like very clear and transparent, and also maybe sometimes brief, like abbreviated, because you have to get the point across. So,
right.
how do you then ensure that, say, the executive's vision and their directives are clearly communicated across teams, especially because they can't be everywhere at once? So, in that way, maybe you're their proxy.
So I think there's, again, kind of tuning into my empathetic radar thing. You think about how people process information,
Mhm.
and maybe you're more visual, and maybe somebody else is more auditory, and how people receive messages or tune in. You think about, okay, how would I want to receive messages? And given you think about on a daily basis, we are barraged with Slacks and texts and emails and calls and all these different forms of communications. And you kind of have to figure out, I'm really good at um, okay, what's the best way that you like to talk to me? I know people who are like strictly texters. I know people who are strictly slackers and they're like, save their other to do laters or whatever their lists. So,
Mhm.
like, I think about when we would need to communicate with somebody, how we're going to do that in several different modes so that we catch everybody. Because there's nothing worse than when you work for the CEO who's trying to get a message out to a large group of people, and somebody who's on the receiving end who's and everyone's important, but like somebody thinking that was an important message and I missed it because I
Mm.
missed it for whatever reason, or I it got buried or what for whatever what that can be really embarrassing for somebody even in management to say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know about this meeting. How did I have no idea?" So you want to use all possible means of communications just to make sure that you are communicating in the way that somebody wants to receive that. So not only um, being a voice, but slacking a message, sending gentle reminders to people, and maybe sending a very specific tailored message to a smaller group of people, um, both visually and you know telling people like
Mhm.
auditorily. And I think that's so important because a leader wants to make sure that everything is clear and concise and getting out to the people that obviously need to attend or be there. And I just remember using several different modes of communication within our group because we had at this one particular company, we had a group of executives who were strictly on WhatsApp because they were international,
Mhm.
and that was the best communication path for them. We communicated via Slack and also emails, and then obviously the calendar invitation, so that you feel like you were covering all your bases in order to get that person's attention. And then additionally, our top executive team, if they were being communicated with, for me, it was very important to make sure that I had a good relationship with all the admins who supported that executive team. Because in this role, sitting in the chair with your executive who you work closely with, it's so important to have not only buy-in, but just a really excellent relationship with those people because the EA team, they've got your back and we all supported each other. And that was one of the best things that I love and that I do love about working with other executive assistants is like knowing that you've got that kind of shared mindset and shared goals and using your communication skills to not only notify them so that they can communicate to their executives. And I think that's the last conduit
Mm.
point that's really important is like they may have seen it, they may have not, they may not have checked their email, but you tell their executive assistant and they're going to be like, yeah, I need to make sure that my executive knows all the details so they can be there and everybody's happy and communicated out to in a proper way so that they have what they need.
You mentioned something very key there, that I think is the underlying, like, point of success or something here. You mentioned buy-in, and you have this unique task of amplifying not just the executive's effectiveness and influence over an organization, but you have to carve out your own influence and create those relationships with virtually everybody so that they know to communicate back with you, they trust you, they understand that the directives that are coming from you hold weight. How do you balance advocating the executive agenda with, asserting your own professional perspective, your own insights, and nurturing those relationships?
I love building those relationships. I think it's, first of all, fascinating to learn how other people work and sharing with people. But um, one of the things that I love is continuing to build my knowledge with other people because I love sharing what I know to see if it can help other people. That's part of my coaching and mentoring is, reaching out to other people. Hey, how can I help you? Or people reach out to me and say, hey, do you know somebody or whatever? But that aside, it's like, you know, finding the things that interest you. And for me, that's the coaching and mentoring and sharing
Mhm.
knowledge with other assistants because there's always somebody coming behind you who may not know everything that you do or know how to do it. And it helps them up their game with their executive, first of all. So you kind of build the relationship and then you build trust. And I think it's great that people in our roles, not only we learn from our executives, we learn how they operate, and that really helps other people say, "Hey, that's a great strategy. I should use that in my own, you know, daily business practices." So, using my talents and my radar and all the things that I'm good at, like naturally building relationships, you kind of step out there kind of in front of your executive sometimes with the people that he's communicating with. So you want to build those relationships because not only does it help you look good, it helps your executive look good. And kind of relating back to what you said about being a proxy, you want your executive to trust you with their high value people.
Mhm.
And that's so important because it's all about how you treat people. And getting back to kind of what you said about we're human first, right? And we want to not only support our executive and do the best job that we can, but we want them to be proud of us and we want, you want to make your executive look great. That's your job ultimately.
Right.
And so with that in mind, I think about okay, if I was standing in my executive's shoes or sitting in their chair doing email, how would they do this? How would they react to this? And so you want to kind of have that strategic mindset so that you're thinking about their MO and how they would approach something. And if you do that, you're not you have to step back and think for a minute. You don't just like fly off and just be like, "Oh, I'm going to handle this." Because you want to think about how it affects the business and how it affects their reputation because everything nowadays is so visible and it's all about
Mhm.
reputation. So managing that is super important and again, kind of the key. trust and crux of your relationship with your executive.
I'm
So
so glad that we have had this conversation because I think a lot of the skills that you have discussed today and that maybe come naturally to you are just so important wherever you sit it within an organization. I don't think they're things that are, hallmarks of just being a fantastic EA, but being a great employee and coworker as well. Like that if we all operate in this way, then we can be better together, especially with the building relationships and the constant and transparent communication. They're all things that are good for all of us. I think maybe some of us are better at it than others, and that's why you're an EA.
well, it's a
Renee,
lot of fun. It's a lot of
yes.
fun, and I enjoy working with people and meeting people, and I feel like, honestly, of all the places that I've ever worked and changed jobs, bringing those relationships with me in my life has been so rewarding and valuable because those are people that I've kinda kept and brought along as contacts, and bringing that as your network and sharing those with other people when you can help create connections is great.
Yes. Renee, thank you so much for your time today. And speaking of relationships, if anyone watching would like to reach out to you, expand their network, ask about your coaching and mentoring services, how can they connect with you?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm right there on LinkedIn. You can find me and reach out and send me a message anytime. I would love to talk or share with anyone.
Fabulous. And I know you are very responsive on LinkedIn. So that's a great place to reach you. I
Thank you
don't
so
know.
much, Lauren.
Thank you. I don't know how you juggle it all, but it's impossibly impressive. So thank you for your time today because I know it is valuable time. And for anyone who is watching, if you would like to be a guest on the show, you can send me an email, lauren@compt.io. Thanks for watching today. We'll see you next time.